Hi guys, very good morning. I'm Rajesh and welcome you on behalf of RD Education Services. RD Education Services work is engaged into grooming the upcoming talent into commercial domain. In this presentation, I have covered up how e-invoicing work under GST regime. An invoice is a commercial instrument issued by seller to buyer. It identifies both the trading partners and list, describes and quantify the items sold, shows the date of shipment and mode of transport, prices and discounts if any, and delivery and payment terms. In certain cases, especially when it is signed by seller or seller's agent, an invoice serves as a demand for payment and becomes a document of title when paid in full. Types of invoice include commercial invoice, consular invoice, custom invoice, and performa invoice. It is also called a bill of sale or contract of sale. Under the GST regime, a tax invoice means the tax invoice referred to in Section 31 of CGST Act 2017. This section mandates issuance of invoice or a bill of supply for every supply of the goods or services. It is not necessary that only a person supplying goods or services need to issue invoice. The GST law mandates that any registered person buying goods or services from any unregistered person needs to issue a payment voucher as well as a tax invoice. The type of invoice to be issued depend upon the category of the registered person making the supply. For example, if a registered person is making or receiving supply from unregistered person, then a tax invoice needs to be issued by such registered person. However, if a registered person is dealing only in exempt supplies or is availing of composition scheme, as in form of composition dealer, then such registered person need to issue a bill of supply in lieu of invoice. The invoice should contain description, quantity, value, and such other prescribed particulars in case of supply of goods, and the description and value such prescribed particulars in case of supply of services. An invoice or a bill of supply need not to be issued if the value of supply is less than 200 rupee, subject to other specified condition. Under GST, a tax invoice is a important document. It is not only evidences supply of goods or services, but it is also an essential document for the recipient to avail input tax credit. A registered person cannot avail input tax credit unless he is in possession of a tax invoice or a debit note. GST is chargeable at the time of supply. Invoice is an important indicator of the time of supply. Broadly speaking, time of supply of the goods or services is the date of issuance of invoice or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. However, special procedure for payment of tax has been prescribed for registered person other than composition dealers supplying goods. Such category of person supply of goods other than composition dealer need to pay GST only at the time of issuance of invoice, irrespective of when they receive payment. Thus, the importance of invoice under GST cannot be overemphasized. Suffice it is to say that tax invoice is the primary document in evidencing the supply and vital for availing input tax credit. Now I'm going to discuss about what is the difference between tax invoice and bill of supply. Start with sale type. It is under tax invoice, it is called all types of taxable sales, which includes your local sale as well as central sale. Whether and in the case of bill of supply, it is used for all type of exempt sales or sale by composition dealer. Then I'm going to take about tax type. In tax invoice, CGST, SGST, IGST used separately, and bill of supply, no tax to be shown on bill. Registered, unregistered buyer. In case of unregistered buyer, name, address, state, place of delivery is compulsory required if invoice value is before tax is more than 50,000, and in case of bill of supply, no such provision is there. Composition scheme. uh, Under tax invoice, can be used for both local and central sale, and for bill of supply can be used for both local sale in case of composition dealer, as a composition dealer cannot made to both local and central sales. Now, when a tax invoice or a bill of supply should be issued by a registered person, the time for invoice time for issuing invoice would depend on the nature of the supply, which include whether it is a supply of goods or services. A registered person supplying taxable goods shall, before or at the time of removal of the goods, where supply involves movement of the goods or delivery or making available thereof to the recipient, issue a tax invoice showing the description, quantity and value of goods, tax charge thereon, and such other particular has been prescribed in the invoice rules. The government may, on the recommendation of the council by notification, specify the categories of the goods or supply in respect of which a tax invoice shall be issued within such time and in such manner as may be prescribed. So basically, we are talking about goods under normal sales and goods under continuous supply, then service, general case, and services again, continuous in case of bank and NBFC we are talking about. So in case of services which takes place as a general category, supply one has to issue a service bill within 30 days of supply of services, and in case of services provided by bank and NBFC, time frame is 45 days. Content of invoice. There is no prescribed format for an invoice. However, invoice rules make it mandatory for an invoice to have following fields. Only applicable fields are to be filled, which includes your name, address, GSTIN of supplier, a consecutive serial number, date of its issues, name, address, and GST, name and address of the recipient and address of delivery, along with his state name and code, HSN code of the goods or accounting code of the services, description of the goods or services, quantity in case of goods, and unit or unique quantity goods thereof. Then total value of supply of goods or services or both. Taxable value of supply of goods or both taken into account along with discounts after discount. Rate of tax, which includes your central tax, state tax, integral tax, union territory tax or cess. Amount of tax charge in respect of taxable goods or services. Place of supply along with name of state. Then address of delivery, where the same is different from, in case same is different from the place of supply. Whether the tax is payable or reverse charge basis. Signature or digital signature of the supplier. Revise invoices. A registered person may, within 1 month from the date of issuance of certificate of registration and in such manner as has been prescribed in the invoice rules, issue a revised invoice against the invoice already issued during the period beginning with the effective date of registration till the date of issuance of certificate of registration to him. This provision is necessary as a person who becomes liable for registration has to apply for registration within 30 days of the becoming liable for registration. When such an application is made within the time period and registration is granted, The effective date of the registration is the date on which person become liable for registration. Thus, there would be a time lag between the date of grant of certificate of registration and the effective date of registration. For supplies made by such person during the intervening period, the law enables issuance of revised invoice so that ITC can be availed by recipient on such supplies. Now we are going to discuss about bill of supply format. Is bill of supply shall be issued by the supplier containing the following details, which includes your name and address along with GST of the supplier, a consecutive serial number along with the financial services, the financial year, and date of its issuance, name, address, GST, if registered, HSN code of goods or accounting code for services, description of the goods or services or both, value of supply of goods or services or both, and signature or digital signature of the supplier or authorized representative. In case of continuous supply of the goods, where successive statement of the accounts or successive payments are involved, the invoice shall be issued before or at the time each such statement is issued, or as case may be, each such payment is received. Now I'm going to take taxable services. A registered person supplying taxable services shall, or before the provision of service but within the prescribed period, issue a tax invoice showing the description, value, tax charged thereon, and such other particulars as has been prescribed in the invoice rules. The government may, on the recommendation of the council, by notification and subject to such condition as may be mentioned therein, specify the categories of services in respect of which any other documents issued in relation to supply shall be deemed to be a tax invoice. Tax invoice may be issued, thus it can be seen that in the case of goods, an invoice has to be issued before at the time of supply. In case of services, however, invoice has to be issued before or after the provision of services. If the invoice is issued after the provision of service, it has to be done within the specified period of 30 days from the date of supply of services as per invoice rules. In case of bank and NBFC, NBFC, specified period is 45 days. In case of continuous supply of services, where the due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract, the invoice shall be issued on or before the due date of the payment. The due date of payment is not ascertainable from the contract, the invoice shall be issued before or at the time when the supplier of the service receive the payment. The payment is linked to completion of an event. The invoice shall be issued or before the date of completion of that event. Now I'm going to discuss about issue of invoice in case where supply of services ceases under a contract before the completion of supply. In this case, where supply of the services ceases under a contract before the completion of supply, the invoice shall be issued at the time when the supply ceases, and such invoice shall be issued to the extent to the supply made before such session. Now I want to discuss about sale on approval basis in more length, where the goods being sent or taken on the approval for sale or return are removed before the supply takes place. The invoice shall be issued before or at the time of supply or 6 months from the date of removal, whichever is earlier. Now I'm going to discuss about advance payment. Wherever a registered person receives an advance payment with respect to any supply of the goods or services or both, he has to issue a receipt, voucher, or any other document containing such particular or has been prescribed in invoice rules, evidencing receipt of such payment. Where any such recipient receipt voucher is issued but subsequently no supply is made and no tax invoice issued, registered person who has received the advance payment can issue a refund voucher against such payment. That receipt voucher need to contain the following particulars: name, address of GST and along with GSTIN of the supplier, consecutive serial number, then date of issuance, name, address of GSTIN, description of the goods, amount of advance tax taken, rate of tax, amount of tax charged, place of supply along with the name of the state and its code, whether the tax is payable or reverse charge basis, signature or digital signature of supplier. It has been provided in the invoice rule that if at the time of receipt of advance the rate of tax is not determinable, tax may be paid at the rate of 18%. Nature of supply is not determinable, the same has to be treated as interstate supply. Now I'm going to discuss about more in length about reverse charge. What is reverse charge? GST is normally charged by supplier of the goods or services. Supplier is liable to collect the tax from recipient and pay the total amount of government to the government. But in some cases, recipient of the goods services is liable to pay GST instead of supplier. This is essence of reverse charge. Important points to be taken care under RCM or reverse charge mechanism. Goods and services notified under section 9.3 and 9.4 must have been registered under GST. Under the reverse charge mechanism, the GST applicable must be submitted to the government on every 22nd of next month. The input tax credit will be available for all RCM goods and services used for furtherance of the business according to GST paid, and the service acquiring individual who is also paying reverse charge can take benefit of the input tax credit. There will no auto population of detail of the GST paid under RCM in GSTR2, but it will be subject to manual furnishing of details. When the RCM is applicable, the invoice must be arranged by the recipient on itself, while the invoice along with consolidated purchases should be issued on a daily basis on all the GST applicable who are under section 31(3). Payment voucher must be issued by the recipient at the time period of supplier's payment. The ITC is not available for reverse charge mechanism payment to the authority. The composition scheme registered individual also come under reverse charge. Well, there will be no credit of RCM to be availed. The reverse charge mechanism applicable to the payment made in advance also. Note, if in case dealer is unregistered under GST, then he has to allow to deal in interstate transaction. For any reverse charge mechanism to be applicable, there must be only intrastate transaction. In coming presentations, I'm going to discuss more reverse charge in more detail basically. List of services. These are the list of the services on which reverse charge will be applicable. So one can go through the services provider and recipient details. Now I'm going to discuss about invoice-tax amount. Amount of tax to be indicated in invoice. Where and supply is made for a consideration, every person who is liable to pay tax for such supply has to prominently indicate in all documents relating to assessment tax, invoice and other like documents the amount of tax which shall form part of the price at which such supply is made. The manner of issuing invoice. Triplicate. The invoice shall be prepared in triplicate in case supply of the goods in the following manner. Original copy being marked as original for recipient, duplicate copy being marked as duplicate for transporter, and triplicate copy being marked as a triplicate for supplier. In case of duplicate, the invoice shall be prepared in duplicate in case of supply of services in the following manner. The original copy being marked as original for recipient, the duplicate copy being marked as duplicate for supplier. The serial number of the invoices issued during a tax period shall be furnished electronically through the common portal in form GSTR1. Now let's discuss credit note. In case where the tax invoice has been issued for a supply and subsequently it is found that value of the tax charge in that invoice is more than what is actually payable or chargeable, or where the recipient has returned the goods, supplier is supposed to issue a credit note to the recipient. A registered person who issue such a credit note has to declare details of such credit note in the return for the month during which such credit note has been issued, but not later than September following the end of financial year in which such supply was made, or date of the furnishing of the relevant annual return, whichever is earlier. The tax liability of registered person will be adjusted in accordance with the credit note issued. However, no reduction in the output tax liability of the supplier shall be permitted if the incidence of tax and interest on such supply has been passed on to other person. Now let's discuss about debit note. In case where tax invoice has been issued for a supply and subsequently it is found that the value or tax charge in that invoice is less than what is actually payable or chargeable, the supplier can issue a debit note to the recipient. Any registered person who issue a debit note in relation to a supply of the goods or services or both shall declare the details of such debit note in the return for the month during which debit note has been issued, and tax liability shall be adjusted in such manner as may be prescribed. Now let's discuss about revised tax invoice, which includes your credit and credit or debit note. A revised tax invoice and credit or debit note has to contain the following particulars. It should contain the word called revised invoice, whichever is applicable, and will consist name, address, GST of the supplier, nature of documents, a consecutive serial number of containing alphabets, numerical of special characters, then date issuance of document, name and address, GST, name and address of the recipient and address of delivery, then serial number and date of corresponding tax invoice, value of taxable supply of the goods or services, including your signature or digital signature of the supplier. Now I'm going to discuss about input service distributor. Input service distributor means an office of the supplier of the goods or services or both, which receives tax invoices towards receipt of input services and issue a prescribed document for the purposes of distributing credit of central tax, state tax or IGST paid on the said services to a supplier of the taxable goods or services or both having same PAN as that of the ISD. It is important to note that ISD mechanism is meant only for distributing the credit on common invoice pertaining to input service only, and not goods, which includes your inputs or capital goods. Companies may have their offices at one place and units at other place, which may be registered separately. The head office would be procuring certain services which would be for common utilization of all units across the country. The bills for such expenses would be raised on the head office, but the head office itself would not providing any output supply or so as to utilize the credit which gets accumulated on account of such input services. Goods example of ISD are marketing services, insurance, telecommunication services, software services, banks, and HR consulting firms. Since the common expenditure is meant for the business for all unit, it is but natural that the credit of input service is respect of such common invoice should be apportioned between all consuming unit. ISD mechanism enables such proportionate distribution of credit of input service among all the consuming units. We take an example of X Limited of Mumbai, who hires an HR consulting firm for its branches at Kolkata, Delhi, and Patna. HR consulting firm raised an invoice of 13,440 rupees, which includes basically basic invoice includes your 12,000, including 12% GST in the name of X Limited. In this case, X Limited can distribute GST portion rupee 1,440 among its branches. An input service distributor is a business which receives invoice for service used by its branches. Input service distributor is an office of banking or financial institutions, includes a non-banking financial company. An ISD invoice or as maybe ISD Credit Note issued by an input service distributor shall contain the following details: name and address, GSTN of the input distributor, a consecutive serial number, date of issue, the name address of GSTN of the recipient, amount of credit distributor, signature or digital signature. Where the input service distributor is an office of bank or financial institution, including company, and tax invoice shall include a document in lieu thereof by whatever name called, whether or not serially number, but containing the prescribed information. Where the supplier of the taxable services is a issuer or a banking company or a financial institution, include a non-banking institutions or company, the same supplier shall issue a tax invoice or any other documents in lieu thereof by whatever name called, but it should contain serial number and whether or not containing the address of the recipient of taxable services, but containing information as prescribed under Rule 1 of the invoice rules. Now let's discuss about transportation of the goods with an invoice. Where the supply of the goods services, taxable services is a goods transport agency supply services in relation to transportation of the goods by roads. In goods carries the said supplier shall issue a tax invoice or any other document in lieu thereof, whatever name called, containing the gross weight of the consignment, name of the consigner, and consignee, registration number of the goods carriage in which goods are transported, detail of the good transported, details of place of the origin of destination, GST of the person liable for paying tax as prescribed under Rule 1 of the invoice rule. Taxable service is supplying passenger transportation service. A tax invoice shall include ticket in any form by whatever name called, whether or not serially numbered or whether or not containing the address of recipient of service, but containing other information as prescribed under the Rule 1 of the invoice rule. Now let's discuss about transportation of goods when it takes place without any invoice. In the following cases, it is permissible for consignor to issue a delivery challan in lieu of invoice at the time of removal of the goods, which should contain supply of the in case of supply of the liquid gas, the quantity at the time of removal from the supplier is not known, and transportation of goods for job work, transportation of goods for a reason any other than by way of supply, such other supplies as may be notified by the board, the delivery challan serially numbered not exceeding 16 characters in the name in one or multiple series. So it should have date and number of the delivery challan, then name address of GSTN of the consigner, name address of GSTN or UIN of the consignee. HSN code description should be mentioned along with quantity. Taxable value, tax rate should be there, and place of supply should mention along with signature. For all updates, one can refer this site where day-to-day updates are coming up. In next session, I'm going to discuss about online invoicing, how to raise online invoices. So till then, thank you so much for listening.